News desk.
Thank you, Krishna.
Well, you're fresh from that march. Now, this was always going to be a volatile, emotional gathering or march, Yolisa. But, I mean, was there always an air of expectation that things were going to go awry from the very outset?
Well, absolutely. You remember that the ANC had, in fact, on many occasions, warned the Democratic Alliance that it is dangerous, whatever that meant at the time. In fact, even the newspapers this past weekend had the interview with President Jacob Zuma warning that it would be dangerous to march to the headquarters of the ANC Luthuli House instead of going through to the union buildings, where, of course, this is the headquarters of government. But the Democratic Alliance as well, it would seem they had anticipated this because they hired a private company, security company, to ensure that their members are protected. We do know that, of course, they also had ambulances on standby in case there's anything. But there was always the air of anticipation that there could possibly be violent confrontation. But just to add, Krishna, if you cast your mind back just 2 years ago in 2012, when the DA marched into the headquarters of COSATU, the Federation, yes, there was blood that was spilled there because there was a lot of confrontation between COSATU members and the DA members. But of course, 2 decades ago as well, if you remember when it was still called the Shell House, when IFP marched onto Luthuli House, a lot of people died.
How did Democratic Alliance supporters react to the news that the march was being stopped?
Well, in fact, I must hasten to emphasize that the DA march was quite peaceful. When they converged at Westgate, Anderson Street, thousands of them were bussed in from early this morning. And when we got there, there's a lot of discipline. Soon, the DA leader, Helen Zille, joined them, and she was telling the media and the supporters that, in fact, this is worrying. ANC supporters at Luthuli House, at Beyers Naudé, where they were supposed to hand over the memorandum, are already converging there. They've got bricks, pangas and nopkeries. We also saw this in person, where ANC supporters had all kinds of armory with them, which was concerning already. But then there was a clash where the DA supporters, when they were moving to Beyers Naudé, where they were meant to hand over the memorandum, clashed with the ANC supporters, and it became quite clear that should they proceed, there's going to be violence and a lot of blood will be spilled. And police and traffic cops decided that, you know what, rather the DA supporters must just move back. And again, they moved back peacefully to where they had started, and from then on they just left the march and they didn't hand over the memorandum.
Yolisa, just your thoughts. How provocative a move was this by the Democratic Alliance to attempt to march to Luthuli House? Was this not a recipe for disaster from the outset?
Well, Krishna, I mean, this is a tricky one because we all have a right to march to any headquarters for that matter. The ANC is the ruling party in this country. However, the ANC has been steadfast in emphasizing that in as much as we are the ruling party, this is a manifesto, this is a wish list. Government is at union buildings. If you believe that government is not delivering the real jobs, as you put it, as the Democratic Alliance puts it, then march to the government headquarters and not with us. But what was concerning once we got to Luthuli House was a clear indication that a whole lot of people have been bussed in, not only from Gauteng, but from other provinces. They slept here from last night already. Others had already come in, and it was clear that they were anticipating confrontation, violent one at that, because even the songs they were singing, even the weapons were there. When it comes to the DA supporters, it was, I mean, a lot of people are complaining, one would call it trivial, that you see a sea of black faces, whereas a lot of people do know, of course, that the traditional support of the Democratic Alliance is mainly white people. But the CBD came to a virtual standstill today. It was even harder for us to get our satellite vans so that we can broadcast these live.
Thank you, Yolisa. For more on the DA march in Johannesburg, CBD, we are now joined on the line by our political analyst, that's Ralph Mathekga, to give us more information. Good afternoon, Ralph, and thank you for your time on the PM News Desk.
Good afternoon, and thanks for inviting me.
Look, can this march by the Democratic Alliance on Luthuli House this afternoon be deemed a failure?
Well, I think that first and foremost, it's quite a concern, and it's unfortunate that in our country now, 20 years into democracy, we barely can tolerate a peaceful march. And it should be a concern about our commitment to civil liberties that you just can't have people freely marching. I hear about intimation of possible violence, and that's the reason why the march has been stopped. No one is a win out of this. So I really can't say it's a fail. I'll say if there is anyone who has failed today, it should be South Africa. But the second point as well is the wisdom of the DA going into this kind of a march. I mean, what is it that the DA stand to gain out of this? The DA is a party that is well represented in Parliament. They do have all the platform to raise their concerns with the ANC. And over and above that, they should come up with their own alternative instead of staging a march. So the march by the DA, the wisdom of it, I don't really see it. I think it is pure politicking. It is just attention grabbing by the DA, and it shows exactly that the party seems to be bankrupt when it comes to ideas. They are in opposition. They must sit down, work on an alternative towards what the ANC is putting forth, and talk to voters about that.
Ralph, there's a perception out there that the Democratic Alliance, well, it's actually trying to cash in on quick support by playing on the emotions of people due to the desperation that comes with being unemployed and jobless. How justified is this perception right now?
Certainly, they're trying to cash in on that. It appears as if they haven't really been doing very well on the headlines. I mean, we know the last time the DA has been able to dominate the headline, it was on the Mercy merger with Aham that has become a failure. And we now see them trying to come up with this kind of a march and trying to stage a march like that for a party that has got so much experience as an opposition party. I think this is clearly a cheap shot by the DA. There is so much that they can do. They can just go back to the drawing board and show everyone how are they going to do things differently. So this is just politicking by the party that is trying to take it to the ANC. And unfortunately, even if the ANC's job kind of attempt to bring about jobs it's not so solid. With the DA's march, it makes the ANC appear even more solid. Unfortunately, the DA is choosing a wrong route on this one.
Look, Ralph, isn't marching to another political party's headquarters a recipe for disaster? Should the Democratic Alliance not have learned from past experience when they marched to COSATU office in Braamfontein in 2012? Well, that ended in a skirmish. What does it really hope to achieve here? It won't change ANC policies with one march.
Marching to another party or a union or some kind of organization offices, it's not necessarily a disaster. It shouldn't be a disaster. Unfortunately, history shows in South Africa that it is a disaster, but that's not supposed to be the case. We should be free to move as citizens, and political parties should also be given the opportunity to march. But the wisdom of the DA, I think, is the one that really comes into question here. Probably they were aware that they were never going to reach Lithuli House, and they will get political point scoring by even merely being unable to march all the way to Lithuli House. We do have an unfortunate history in South Africa where we don't have tolerance across different political parties. That should not be the case. We should be allowing, or the case should be such that each and every party can be able to stage a march so that we can look at the substance of why those marches are being undertaken. And I think at this point, the DA substance, the substantive issue here is quite thin, and the party is going to hide behind the logistics that it couldn't make it to Lithuli House. I don't think they've got anything else to present in Lithuli House. The ANC should have just ignored them and allowed them to march to Lithuli House.
Thank you, Ralph. Moving on, suspended COSATU